He does both.
Do you notice any difference in sound?
We're waiting for Frank to join us. We've just started the live stream where our show's going to start.
I was using an SM7B, and I had to get a booster because it was so low. This one, you don't need the booster.
Oh, you used one of those cloud lifter things before?
Something like that. I've got a...
What?
Let me know.
What do you mean start? I will.
Oh, we're already live, by the way.
Look at these. This is what I got, Brett.
Oh, yeah.
Frank.
Yep.
All right.
I have the cloud lifter one.
This is called Dynamite.
Aha.
Okay.
Speaking of dynamite.
Audio, quiet, please. Audio check, Frank.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Perfect. All right.
Okay, we're going to.
I completely forgot that it was a 4-hour time difference now instead of a 5-hour time difference, which changes on Sunday back to a 5-hour time difference.
That's right.
Okay, well,
we get back in sync.
Here we go. So
okay.
We're gonna
space. I need the space.
Yeah, we need a little space. Okay. Steve needs space. And then we're gonna
We all need space.
Okay. So what that
Final frontier
is a quiet space. And we're gonna go in 3, 2, 1, and
Booyah. This is Steve Gilmore. This is the Gilmore Gang. Welcome. Yeah. I don't know. There's that Babalu or, Howard Stern stuff. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But luckily, Brent Leary is here to guide me through the soulless aspects of my personality.
I got to tell you, though, only people who are woke would start a show with Booyah.
I rest his case.
There it is.
Okay. Yeah. That's Brent Leary. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you. I'm just glad to be here. Literally, we had a tropical storm here in Atlanta. I survived.
Oh, that's right.
Wow.
There was over a million people. No, it started out as Hurricane Zeta, but by the time it got to Atlanta, it was tropical storm. And over 1 million people in North Georgia lost their power. Some people still don't have it. Woo. I was one of the fortunate ones that didn't lose it.
Did you early vote?
Yes, I did. I'm already in there. I'm booked.
Joining us from the marshes of the swamp is Dennis Pombriant.
That's right, Steve. This is the swamp that Donald Trump was going to drain. And here we are. It's still pretty wet.
Looks nice.
Thank you. Yeah.
Promises.
Promises. Still plenty of swamp creatures.
Are you going to list them again like your material prescribed?
Hey, I already did that. You weren't listening.
I think we're all lucky that wasn't on the air. I mean, you can't use it again unless you have never used it before.
Well, I've used it, so I can't use it.
Okay, perfect. Also joining us from Palo Alto, California is Keith Tier.
Wow, and usually I go last. I must have been promoted.
Steve saves the best for the last.
It's a complex. That's all I can say.
Oh, mute your phones.
I got it.
It's a robocall.
Steve,
Oh, is it me?
phone, please.
Who is it?
It's got to be Steve.
Yeah, it is.
It was me. Anyway, hi everyone.
Thank you. And the guy from England, who is in England at this point, is Frank Radis. Welcome, Frank.
As opposed to the guy from England who's not in England, but is in Palo Alto. Hi.
That's right.
How are you all?
Rounding out the troupe, the comedy troupe, is Michael Markman.
How do you do?
How do I do?
I don't know.
How do you do?
So what's new from the Pacific Northwest, Michael?
Well, like everyone else, our case numbers are going up. They're still relatively low, but they are rising.
And have you early voted?
Oh yes, I voted the day after the ballots came. I spent a few hours filling in all the little spots and popped it in.
And trying to make a decision.
October 16th.
Trying to make a
Struggled with
decision.
your choice, right?
Pardon?
Struggled with your choice, as what Frank just said.
Yes. No. Exactly.
No bites, no takers.
No bites. Nothing. Nothing.
All right. So what are we going to talk about today? I mean, it's been like 7 years of this.
God, it feels like it.
Where are we?
Oh, I thought we were going to talk about the new West Wing episode again, but I guess that's probably not it.
Well,
Now, how about The Mandalorian? Has anyone seen The Mandalorian new episode?
Not
I'm
yet.
saving it up.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Sunday.
What about the
Why?
Queen's
Good?
Gambit? That was good. Anybody seen the
I
Queen's
hear
Gambit?
that's great. I haven't seen it.
That was really good.
What was it about?
This I don't know. It was set in the like 50s or 60s. This orphaned young lady who grew up in this really ratty orphan home, but the caretaker, like the janitor, played chess in the cellar of the basements and stuff like that. And she would go down and clean the stuff that the teachers taught her to clean, and then would go and see the guy playing chess and ask him to teach her how to play chess. And at first he didn't, then she was persistent, and then he did, and then she ended up beating the chess master from Russia, and everybody broke out in a big celebratory wokeness kind of thing.
It's a sports movie.
Well, wokeness. It's a woke sports movie. I did hear that was great. I'm actually stuck on the binging the right stuff, which is really really good. It's just a reminder of the space program in the 60s, but it's really good.
So this isn't the movie. This is a series.
Yeah, this is a series on I think it's on Disney Plus, and it's really good.
It is really good. I've watched it.
Yeah.
Well, we're stuck on.
That said, my week has been driven by anxiety because I've been saying that it's going to be a landslide for Biden, and this week, every time I look at the TV, it feels as if people's confidence is getting weaker and the gap is getting narrower in a lot of the states. And the most recent one I watched is they focused in only on Pennsylvania, saying, well, if Biden can win Pennsylvania, we're good. And a lot of the more optimistic stuff is being downplayed. So is that just people naturally being cautious, or is there some change in the numbers that's tangible and real?
Or is it?
I think it's people being. I think it's
fundraising?
people are being cautious. I think that's what it is, because I have the exact same lump in my gut as well, and I gave it a lot of thought and came to the conclusion, to make me feel better, because I don't have a kitty in front of me, to make me feel better is that it's the news media doing it on purpose, trying to be careful. I thought I saw Karnacki do that today, and I was like, the numbers he was putting up on the big board belied the sort of downplaying that he was giving it, very much like Trump downplaying the virus. I think the media is
it's a quest. I think it's a quest for ratings and for fundraising.
Could be.
Every appeal tells me that it's incredibly close. And
I think Frank's right. I think it's being stage managed by the media, and because if you look at the numbers haven't changed hardly at all. The numbers that are being reported are what's changing, and it just seems like the remotes they're doing are remotes from places that Hillary didn't win, and Biden isn't expecting to win.
I noticed a couple of the reporters on locations were speak. It felt to me like there was double speak going on. They would say things are really it felt positive, but then let's be cautious, and then they would go down a cautious road. It felt wrong to me. I don't want to be so optimistic that I jinx anything. Of course, my jinxing isn't going to matter one bit, but I just think it's stage managed. Is a good way to put it. I think that the bosses are saying, okay, let's pull back a little bit. There may be more than one reason for pulling back a little bit. One reason may be that they are concerned that their reporting has gone too far over the top, and if Trump wins, they're going to look like they looked in 2016. The other could be, as Michael suggests, that it's a ratings ploy, and that it's a way to for them to get more money by having the people who were working for the campaigns going to the media and saying, guys, relax here. This is not going as good as you think it is.
Well, Frank, I'm sure you remember there were times when presidential elections were called by the media before California closed its polling places. That caused
two ago.
That caused a reduction in the total number of votes, and it caused some statewide offices to go in different ways than were forecasted. So it's quite possible the media is just trying to be really careful not to spook anybody out of going to the polls.
Yeah.
I mean, the great uncertainty has always been who shows up. Who are the likely voters? You have a poll that reflects some kind of judgment as to who is likely to show up, and that's always in question, especially with rising COVID and rising voter suppression.
Well, we've already got 80 million votes in. It's more like 83 million almost. More people have voted in Texas now than did in 2016.
Yeah, it looks like a backlash to the voter suppression. It's one of those hoist by your own petard situations.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of voting still to be done, but there's an awful lot that's out already.
That makes an assumption that the news media is actually trying to do something right. And I don't know that we can say that that's what's going on. One of the things is you're absolutely right that 2 elections ago, the worry was that the West Coast would not go out and vote because the race had been called based on the East Coast numbers. That did bother a lot of people. We all talked about that. But by the time the next election came around, that wasn't anything anyone was talking about.
Yeah.
Because, that was Florida. That was all about Florida at that point. And that was the only conversation that was going on. I can remember Tim Russert holding up that whiteboard with the word Florida, Florida, Florida on it. And we had not seen and or heard anything like that till that night.
I think
Florida is looking good for Biden, right?
Today is that this is going to be the last election of its kind. I can't see if the Democrats win. I can't see the Electoral College staying the way it is. I can't see the Voting Rights Act not coming back into full force. There are a lot of things that I think are going to change. Even voting season. I mean, I think a national voting month or voting week or fortnight is entirely possible after this election. This is the end of an awful lot, I think.
Well, it's in the power of the Democrats to reform the Voting Rights Act and to repair the post office. I don't think it's within their power to change the Electoral College, except by admitting new states, which they may do.
Or getting the states that have yet to make a decision about changing the Electoral College to make that change.
That's true.
I don't know how you go about doing that. Is that a referendum? Is that how that's done?
It's an amendment. There was actually an amendment to abolish the Electoral College in the 1960s, and it just missed getting enough votes in the House and Senate to send it out to the states for ratification. You need 2/3 of the House and Senate to approve it, and then you need 3/4 of the states to ratify it. But it's a doable thing.
I don't see that happening.
Can it be started at the state level?
It could
I
be
think
started
so.
at the state level, yes.
Yeah.
There's too many states that would never want that to happen, and I live in one of them.
And why is that?
Because if particularly if you're one of those states that has the same amount of U.S. senators, I don't know, a Delaware or a Montana or something like that, but your population compared to California is like nothing, you're basically erasing your power at that point. I just see there's so many states that would not want to see their power lowered to such an extent. Because right now they're right on equal
more as
playing
a
ground.
party issue than a state issue. It's states that are under the control of Republicans that don't want to lose the power that the Republicans have through the Electoral College.
Right, but it's also an example of tyranny of the minority, which is not democratic, and which, you know, depending on who you get in the state legislature, you can do almost anything. I mean, the 19th Amendment passed a century ago. That was not popular by a long shot by a lot of people, but they got just enough states to approve it. It can be done.
Can be done, but think about you say like the tyranny of the minority. I mean, quite honestly, what's the amount of wealth that the top 1% has compared to the rest of us? I mean, we've lived in that for 240 plus years. The minority, the small minority that has the power has always seemed to use that power in order for them to keep the power in those small minority hands. Well, not that the hands are small, but you know.
I don't know what point you're making.
I'm making that
It's about small.
It's always been about whoever has the power, and it's usually a small fraction of the masses wants to keep the power that way. And so for whatever reason, there's a bunch of people who don't have the power that still seem to vote with the folks who do have the power, and they kind of enable the small group of people to continue, kind of running things.
Yeah, all I can do is say, here's the system. Here's how you amend it. What you're doing is trying to predict what people will think 2 or 3 steps down the road. I'm not that smart.
Oh, I'm not predicting.
Or what people won't do.
Or what they've done in the past, because it always seems to be a case where just a small group of people seem to be able to control, the masses of what actually happens. I don't know.
You're assuming that people are actually going to learn something from history.
No, the dynamic is bringing in all these social issues. There's an economic power that has to do. It began with land ownership, and now it has to do with share ownership. But then there are all these social issues that get people to vote against their own economic interests.
There it is.
So if you're anti-Black, if you're anti-gay, if you're anti-immigrant, if you're anti-abortion, we find all these reasons that you have to keep all the people who have the real wealth in power.
Like the Trump tax cut, didn't that pretty much go to the folks at the very top of the economic order? But absolutely, how many people vote who are not in that economic top voted for that?
Those are the people, though, who are saying that the tax cut actually helped them, which I just don't get.
Well, it might have helped them a smidge, but it helped the big guys like us this. And so,
like a smidge.
A smidge or smidges or something. But it's always seems to be a case. You give the little folks a nice lollipop, we'll take the whole candy store, and they'll be okay with it.
I think you've got to, Brent. I think you've got to distinguish between the course of history as it is and will be in the absence of strong individuals making a difference. Ultimately, history is made by individuals, and if you look at people like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, or almost any in my field of venture, look at what Chamath Palihapitiya is doing now with SPACs and going public. Strong individuals can change history. And so the inevitable isn't inevitable because If somebody stands up and just says, I don't accept this, and people listen and do stuff, you can change history. So there's nothing inevitable about the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer. It's because we're passive.
I'm just saying, I'm not even saying, oh, go ahead, Dennis.
I'll be really quick. I was just looking up this quote before you so eloquently said what you said. Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.
And yet, where are we today? I mean,
we've
had all those people, and I some of those people are my personal heroes, and they are the folks that, you know, I would strive to be like. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of those folks around, and they don't. Unfortunately, their ability to captivate and to move kind of goes further and further away with time, and kind of resort to the norm, which is, Brent, you know, the kind of the folks who have been able to maintain that power, even when it's kind of they see some, you know, some movement away from them. Over time, it seems like we still resort to the norm of, you know, the few that have the power want to keep the power and find ways to do that.
I would
with those things,
Brent. I would say that it's you're right. If you look at history statically, I'm old enough to have gone through the transformation that happened between the civil rights era and the Reagan era. And what happened, if you look at how Black rights changed between those two, from mass civil disobedience and protests to under Reagan, you know, work hard at school, get into college, and you'll do well. So basically, change became individualized. Instead of collective responsibility, it became your personal responsibility to do well for yourself. And the argument was that society is not in the way; it's all down to you, which of course is BS. So we're still in that era where strong individuals look for self-advancement more than becoming leaders of movements. But that can change on a dime.
Oh, I agree
about the static view of history. The thing you don't take into account is that you really don't see some of the things that you want to see in prospect. You only see them in retrospect. When you step back and add things up, you can say, well, you know, the 60s was good for something. It didn't solve every problem, but we made progress. And the same thing is operating right now today. There are people out there who are capable and beginning to make inroads, and you know, people like Stacey Abrams and lots of others. I think you look back 20 years from now, you're going to say, hey, you know, they were there, and they.
I sincerely hope that this is the case, but it's not. It's sometimes it's one step forward, or was it 2 steps forward, 1 step back? Sometimes it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and yeah, throughout history, you do have, you know, people who make a difference and are able to kind of, you know, fight and change things, but sometimes that's not a linear path straight up.
It never is, because there's
counteractive forces. Like Trump has the ability to, you know, affect the Voting Rights Act because of, you know, the people who put him in office don't want that to be renewed. Now, who would have thought back in the 2000 era that we would actually see the potential for Voting Rights Act being discontinued, which means I'm in a state which the Voting Rights Act was put in place for. And I could literally see, if that were to go away, resorting back to what was going on, why these southern states initially seceded. You could see things starting to roll back. I mean, we had our governor in 2018 who ran for governor. At the time, he was the head of elections.
Yep.
And he did all the things he could do to suppress votes to make sure that he won. That is going to happen again if certain things are rolled back. It's just going based on what we've seen.
Well, you know, Hegel, cited by Marx, talked about the thesis, antithesis, anything that happens causes a reaction to it. The progress that was made in the 60s called forth in the beginning in the 70s and really galvanized in the 80s the movement to push the courts far to the right, because Republican presidents, Eisenhower and Nixon, appointed Republican jurists to the Supreme Court who affirmed all kinds of rights that changed things. The right to contraception, the right to intermarriage, the right to integrated schools,
right of privacy,
to be Mirandized when you're arrested. All of that was alarmed people on the right as and they started talking about activist judges and legislating from the bench, and so the Federalist Society came into power, well funded, beginning with recruiting people in law schools and pushing as far as they could to push the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court to the right. And now we're going to see a reaction against that. It's going to push it to the left.
Yep. Can't wait.
What happened to trade unionism? Where did that go? Remember that just before before and during the Reagan administrations, trade unionism was still a big deal. Getting the unions, getting their approval for a candidate was a big deal. The only one I've heard really that seems to have made any noise is the police union, which is nowhere near as big as the auto workers union or the steel workers union, neither of which has the power that they had back when the Teamsters was a big deal.
But that's part of the whole trend towards what I broadly think of as depoliticization, de-collectivism, the move towards freedom being identified with individuals and their personal situation as opposed to social groups and their situation. That led to depoliticization. And now politicians don't really represent groups as much as they represent people's perception of their self-interest. And their self-interest is warped. It's not to do with social and economic interest. It's a lot of it is cultural and ideological. And so we're not any longer in a world where there's a left and a right. There's me and you. And who you think me is very specific, depending on your life situation. And you no longer really look to politicians to solve things for you. You're pretty cynical of them, which is why Trump, I think, got in the first place, because he was the anti-politician. So I think there's a whole kind of trend here. And if the Democrats through this election can, bring back this sense of we're all in it together, that would be an amazing thing. And COVID might accelerate that. And then you get back to individuals who lead social movements instead of just being individuals.
All right, so I think I recommended this a few weeks ago, but I'll recommend it again because it really covers this ground exceptionally well. And that's a book called Evil Geniuses, which was published maybe a month or two ago, I think. The subtitle is The Unmaking of America, A Recent History. It's by Kurt Anderson. It is very culturally aware. It's an easy read. It's remarkably well researched, and it covers these great movements of how the forces that tried to undo Roosevelt's New Deal began gathering strength and undermining unions and undermining the rulings from the Supreme Court and from the civil rights era. It's a remarkable book, and I give it the highest recommendation.
Yeah,
Evil Geniuses.
To me, the very label of being an American undermines any sense of social solidarity because it reinforces that you're an American, you're an individual. I don't think there's an interpretation of being an American which is good for social progress.
Well, look at the Roosevelt era. That was very good for social progress. And
then, yes,
trade unions were very American. Eisenhower was very much in support of the trade union movement.
I think then that.
I think that yes, you're right, Michael. That was an ideology that lasted all the way through Reagan, and beyond. It just, I actually, my question originally was, when did it stop?
Well, it didn't stop. It was undermined. You move auto factories to the south where unions aren't strong, and you have non-union shops, and suddenly the auto workers union is weaker.
And they passed laws called right to work.
The big move was
Right to work.
the air
States,
traffic
yeah.
controllers. He deliberately acted to bust that union and fire them all and replace them.
That may have been the point at which things began to fall apart in terms of what trade unionism was all about. You certainly never
that's
heard
not the
about
beginning of it. That's a big milestone, but it's not the beginning of it. It's
Well, in
like
support of what Michael was
the tipping point
saying,
is what I call it, rather than the beginning.
Yeah.
in support of you, Michael, there was a famous bit of work by Arthur Schlesinger Sr., the Harvard historian. Not the his son worked in the Kennedy administration. He was also a historian, but Sr. Posited a 60-year liberal conservative cycle in American politics, and he was writing in the beginning of the 20th century, early 20th century. And his cycles held up remarkably well. So I think there's a lot to be said for what you're saying. I think we are in a moment when the pendulum has swung about as far as it's going to swing.
Steve?
Yeah.
Back to you, Steve.
I have a put on the brakes, make a turn comment.
Good luck.
If I may. And that is, I was reading something, I think it was in the New Yorker just about an hour and a half ago, that was really fascinating about some of the absolute ridiculous bald-faced lies that are coming out of these most recent last couple of days rallies. One of which is this fictitious mask that is supposed to exist in California. Tell us how that mask is doing out there, Steve. The face mask that you,
right?
The one I'm
you
not
have to eat
wearing?
through it. You can't take it off. It's a very complicated mechanical thing.
Well,
I mean,
this is an example of something that Trump does. There is such a mask. Someone devised a mask with a hinge that you could open up to put food in, and then it would close up again. And somehow Trump saw this, probably saw this in a tweet somewhere, and decided this was the mask that everyone in California has to wear now. It's a requirement that everyone wear this mechanical mask. There is such a thing, but it was a wacky invention.
Somebody ought to give
Right,
one.
so-
but
I want to interrupt this. 4 days from now, if Trump loses, are you guys all going to feel a little? Are you going to feel bad that you missed the 60-year cycle flipping?
What do you mean missed?
Well, I mean, everything I've heard in this show so far is about anxiety that Trump's going to win. So
I'll feel less
what if that's not
anxiety.
true?
I'm not worried.
I know who's worried and who's not worried. I mean, this is all Brent's fault because he refuses to acknowledge that he really thinks that Trump is going to lose. Right, Brent?
Wrong.
4 days,
No,
Brent.
seriously, I'm trying to separate the concern.
You said I'm worried that he's going to lose. I'm worried that he's going to win. It's more.
Yeah, I didn't say that what you're worried about. I'm saying that there's, I think you think that Trump is going to lose, but I don't think.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. All right.
Yeah.
No,
You're saying that Brent's not being honest with us? Is that what you're saying?
I'm
No,
being,
not
I'm,
at
I'm
all.
being
I think
honest.
he's
I'm being honest.
with himself by saying that he's the anxiety about the same old thing happening again outweighs his ability to see what might be going on right now. I'd say
Well,
that that's true for
one
all.
of the very important questions that you can ask when you look at history or you look at current politics is who benefits? And the question is, who benefits from the notion that Trump won't go away? Who benefits from the notion that the votes will be successfully suppressed? Who benefits from the notion that they will be successfully challenged? Only Trump. I mean, it's all part of creating a haze in which people feel that their vote is futile. And so far, that's not succeeding.
But that's
people are voting.
A tactic. That's a tactic. And at the end of Tuesday or a week from Tuesday or whatever it's going to be, we're going to find out whether or not that was a legitimate fear or not. My bet is that Biden's going to win.
Ladbrokes has got a 50-to-1 shot bet. You can go and put a pound down and come back and win 50.
Right. But what I'm talking about, or what I'm trying to point out here is there are 6 people here, at least those 6 that I can see. And I think that there's multiple answers to what we think is going to happen. But the reality is once we strip away our fear of what's going to happen, the answer to what we intuit is going to happen is the one that is going to be dominant in this election.
Yeah, and for me, when I do that, I said a couple of gangs ago that I couldn't see Trump winning more than 10 states. I know,
but you always go to this landslide theory, which I think is also.
I was about to adjust myself.
Yeah, let him talk.
I was about to adjust myself. I now believe he can definitely win 12, and he might win another 5. And after that, all bets are off.
So you're basically saying that it's not going to be a landslide.
I don't know if 17 states would count as a landslide in the other direction. It probably would.
Do you have an electoral vote score in your head?
No, I haven't done that. I didn't do that math. I did not do that math, but it's heavily weighted to Biden.
That's what Kornacki's saying.
3 electoral votes. I know what you're talking about. North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas. You can win a hell of a lot of states and not break 100. So I mean, the question really is, can Trump win Florida and Texas?
And he can.
I would think Trump will
win Florida and Texas, and the answer is yes.
Absolutely,
he can.
Yeah, but can he not still win if he loses Florida and Texas, but gets Michigan and Wisconsin and Illinois?
Biden could.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's got he's got multiple pathways. I will say that. Trump doesn't have as many. Biden has a lot of different pathways. Trump doesn't.
There are a couple of interactive sites on the web where you can play with this, where they put all of the really solid states into a circle, and then the questionable states outside, and you can drag them in if you think Trump is going to take it, or if you think Biden is going to take it. And you realize there are just many more paths for dragging states into the Biden column than into the Trump column.
So if you filter out all of the, suppression paranoia and and I'm not saying it's not legitimate. I'm just saying that what we don't know is we don't know how much suppression is going to add to the reality of one or the other winning. It's definitely a tactic. It's probably the only tactic that the Republicans have right now because of the rancid, reality of the candidate. But is it going to be dispositive? Is it going to actually make the difference that, that we are afraid of?
Well, I think Dennis pointed out earlier that the early vote is off the charts. It's unprecedented. So the suppression doesn't seem to be suppressing very well.
Well, we don't know that yet because we know people are scared to go to vote in public. So it's almost like people who never shopped online for groceries before the pandemic, they had to do it. If they wanted to
Well,
eat,
it's
they had to go
ridiculous.
online. So if you had to vote and you wanted to feel comfortable about voting and not taking your life into your hands, you had to do something else. So you switched over to mail. Does that mean that more people overall are going to end up voting for this 2020 versus 2016? How can you tell? You can't tell until you count all the votes.
Well,
Just know that
if
they're
we
all
had a
early.
time machine, if we had a time machine and we went, 7 days ahead, we would know.
Yeah, but do you
Okay.
have one of those?
Well, there are some ways.
I
there
can
are some ways
imagine.
you can know. There are some
You
ways
are some. You are. They're net new voters, right? I mean, people who didn't vote in 2016 that voted this year or something like that.
Well, it just
I
takes.
think that
Every
the
state's gonna be a
energy
little
behind,
What?
I think the energy behind the early vote is a strong indication of who's going to win this election.
Well, that's
One of
been
the
what
things you
the
can
media's
measure
been
is,
saying.
is the number of first-time voters who are early voting and the number of people who sat out in 2016 who are early voting.
Yeah, you
So
can
there
do
is
that.
some
Yeah.
indication
There
that,
is some,
people are coming into the game.
As I said at the beginning of the show, more people have voted in Texas already than voted in 2016. And in 2016, that included obviously the day of the election. There are signs like that throughout the country. Every state's a little different. You got militias carrying long rifles too, so you got to worry about that. But as things go, there's an awful lot of paths for a Biden victory, and there's a lot of indications that many people are getting very serious about getting Trump out of office.
There's another correlation that we've seen over the past few months, and that is the correlation between COVID cases and Trump's approval. And currently, we're at a frightful spike of COVID cases. That can't be helpful to Trump. Not helpful to the country, but it's especially not helpful to Trump.
But it doesn't seem like any of that kind of stuff really shakes the base. But his base seems to be stuck around 40 to 45 or something like that. If he can find a way, to use the courts or the legal battles about people cutting off votes and you have to be counted that night, or you can't count all the votes by the time of the November 3rd, then none of them count. I mean, there's all these little things that are still in play here and it's all state by state. So Pennsylvania, it seems like, how many times have they sued the state to try to get the ballots not counted if they come in I think it was 3 days afterwards, but they postmarked by the 3rd. Yeah, they're still fighting that, and I think they're still fighting in Wisconsin. They're picking their battles, so he's not going down without a fight, and that's why I am still having to stick to where I've been the last couple of months.
Yeah, but where you've been the last couple of months is you're afraid that he can pull it out. But that's not the same thing as, do you think he's going to pull it out?
I can honestly say I am afraid he's going to pull it out, because I think he's going to pull it out. That's why I'm afraid. If I wasn't afraid he could pull it out, I wouldn't be afraid. I'd be like, yeah, don't worry about it. But there are things that they have it there. They are levers that they still have. And I'm saying, yeah, there's still a chance this dude can win, because there's a way that they can play around this.
But when
this is how probability works. There is a chance that he can win. There's a chance that Biden can win. Which chance is bigger?
It
You're never
reminds
going to
me.
find it 100-0.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think
there are multiple pathways for Biden to win. There's definitely more pathways for Biden to win than there are for Trump. I will.
So if you had $1 to bet, where would you bet it?
Well, first of all, I would say, can you loan me $1 to bet?
Absolutely, you got it.
Then
I would bet $1 that Trump would win if I got 50 to 1 odds.
Yeah, you're not losing anything, right? You're using.
But you get
50 to
1 odds that of being wrong too.
Well, I know, but it's
but I only lose $1.
How do you make money on that kind of a bet?
Do you play single numbers in roulette?
What happened?
I've never played roulette.
I mean, roulette, different bets have different odds. They return different amounts. Betting on one number will get you the highest return.
It's not as complicated.
I do have a question though, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I think it's worth talking about again because of all the attention in Florida.
Is the answer going to change this time?
Let's find out.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's about why does it seem like the Latino vote is trending towards Trump?
Oh, it's the Cubans, not the whole.
Is that enough? I mean, the country is primarily Mexican.
Is that enough for
you have
Florida?
You have to recognize that people who speak Spanish come from different countries, and
I get that.
Okay, so the Cuban.
I worked at Univision, guys. I used to work at Univision. Believe me, I get that.
So the question is that enough to flip Florida to Trump? Yes or no? I say yes.
No.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, no, I don't know how many Americans from Puerto Rico have migrated to Florida since the hurricanes.
If he was also winning the over 60 vote, I'd say yes, but I think Biden's getting the old people.
That's right.
But he might not get the older Latinos. That was one of the things that's being talked about. The older Cubans
Right.
might not vote with the older others.
No Cubans, and I generalize, of course, there are exceptions to this, but for the most part, no Cuban's going to vote Democrat because they associate Democrats with Fidel.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, can I read you some statistics? This is from 538. This is very interesting because we were talking a minute ago about probabilities. Probability that Trump wins the popular vote, 3 out of 100.
Yeah, but who gives a shit?
Yes, I go with that.
Go on. Go on, Dennis.
Who cares about the popular vote? Who cares?
I'm reading.
Let him finish. Let him read. Steve, please.
Trump wins more than 50% of the
country, or it used to be.
2 in 100. Biden wins more than 50% of the popular vote, 95 in 100. Trump wins in a landslide, less than 1 in 100. Trump wins the popular vote but loses the electoral college, less than 1 in 100. Biden wins at least one state that Trump won in 2016, 98 in 100. That one statistic there could be the death knell for the Trump campaign.
Well, one state might not be the death knell. How many states does he?
Depends on the state.
Remember, we were saying last year.
I think Biden needs to win at least 3 states that Trump won.
What's the chance that Biden wins? What's that percentage?
89 in 100.
Yeah.
Not according to Vegas.
Okay.
What's Vegas saying?
So you're asking all the questions that are being asked that you just listed are about things that aren't going to happen.
How do you know that? You have a crystal ball?
Oh,
it's that time machine. He just told you about that.
Yeah, it's my intuition. I think Florida's going to go to the Republicans like it always does. Even if it has to go to the Supreme Court first.
This reminds me of my upbringing when, I lived in a poor family. I was the oldest kid of 7, and you always knew something bad was going to happen. So you weren't ever allowed to believe in anything good because you were absolutely certain something bad was going to happen. And it's really hard to be optimistic when you've been beaten up with bad stuff.
That's the media today. That is the media today.
It's easier to be optimistic about something if you're realistic about the things that aren't going to happen the way you want them to.
Well, we'll only know that.
That's kind of a negative way of looking at it. Not that that's a bad thing.
Well, you're relying on deductive reasoning, and I'm trying to give you an inductive reasoning.
Why? Yeah, we've got 2 minutes until Brent has to go off and save the world through sports.
Before Brent goes off, let's just remember that Florida voted twice for Obama.
But
So
they didn't vote for.
Both 2008
Excuse me,
and
if-
2012.
Drop the mic.
Florida is
Don't
always
talk.
very close. It isn't always Republican.
Okay,
It's
Brent,
always
what
very
do you
close.
think? Who's going to win Florida? Not who you're afraid. Who do you think is going to win Florida?
So either one could win, but I think I'm going to go with the guy that's currently in the office. I think he's probably going to win Florida. It'll be very close,
But close doesn't count.
well, it
Yeah.
doesn't. Horseshoes and hand grenades in this election.
Hand
feels more like
grenades.
a
Yeah.
hand grenade getting ready to go off. But
Horseshoes and
grenades.
hand grenades. I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe a name for the show. Yeah.
There it
Quoits.
is.
Quoits. It
horseshoes
also
and hand
works in
grenades.
quoits.
Okay, so Brent, you're going to have to tune in later to find out the answers to all these questions
Stay tuned.
because
I will
we're
stay
going to figure this out.
Are we going to do a
We
show
got 4
on
days to
election
do
night?
it.
No, we got like, a month to do it. If Florida goes to Trump, then it goes to the courts. And then there's all this paranoia about Pennsylvania changing the rules about the Electoral College. Did you see that one?
Yeah,
Yes.
but did you
Doesn't
see-
it, if
That-
it
that's
goes
an
to
open,
Biden,
yeah.
doesn't it go to the courts too?
Pardon?
If Florida goes to Biden, won't it go to the courts too?
No,
I don't think so. If Florida goes to Biden, the win will be so definitive that there'll be no point in challenging. Biden will have so many definitive votes that challenges would be futile. Even
So
if,
what, on the other
even
side
if
of
Trump can flip a couple.
on the other side of Brent leaving, we will discuss whether Texas is important. We will discuss whether we will get into the morass of Pennsylvania, and at the end of the day, everybody except Brent, who's not going to be on the show at that point, will suggest who they think is going to win on Tuesday when the voting stops.
Wow. I can't wait to tune in and watch that. Jeez.
All right. It's the cliffhanger. Thank you, Brent.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to
Dalmain,
seeing you
Brent.
next time.
And everybody stay safe and, get all your exercises and your, vitamins and all that, because we're going to be talking about something after Tuesday, I guess. I just don't know what. Well, I kind of know what.
There'll be plenty. We can talk sports.
Ooh, I'm always there for that. Especially in a year where the Boston sports teams are, sorry, Dennis. See ya.
They're all with me.
You got some.
Wow.
You got a lot of
Mic
good
drop.
LA stuff.
This is Zoom drop he just did.
Drop
Like a
the
mic
Zoom.
drop, but boom, he's gone. Amazing. Okay, so where do we want to continue?
Texas.
Yeah,
Explain
Texas.
explain the Pennsylvania thing, because I don't understand what's going on there.
no, I don't want to get into it. It's
All right.
terrifying. I have enough
Did-
gas left for actually being optimistic now that I predicted that Florida will be a loser for the Democrats, which it always is.
Texas and Pennsylvania certainly have one thing that they're all jumping on, or at least the pro-Trump group is jumping on, and that's the basic abolition of oil as a source of energy moving forward, and that means tons of jobs. And also, that's certainly something that they're talking about, and everyone's grabbed a hold of that. But I saw an interview today with, I think her name is Valenzuela. She's running for Congress in Texas. And, she was saying, and I think actually she would be one of the AOC +7 that's being talked about right now. She was saying that it's really an exciting election down there. And it feels like it's, that the Democrats have terrific momentum in Texas. And hearing that from somebody like her, obviously she's gonna say that, but it seemed heartfelt, and I thought that was kind of interesting and exciting.
There will be movement in Texas, certainly on the state legislature and perhaps congressionally. Whether the big prize of the electoral votes is won by Biden is a little bit less likely. But Texas is very much in play in terms of who will get to reapportion for the next congressional elections.
Okay, Pennsylvania.
Reapportionment. Gosh, that's the big deal. That's the story, isn't it?
Yeah, I expect Texas will get more votes, more congressional seats next time after the census.
So if there's this real lurking wave that's moving toward Biden, do you think Texas can flip? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, that's one.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I think it can.
Okay.
If you're going to ask if it will, I'm not sure how I'll answer.
Okay, Brent.
Keith?
Well, everything I read
you love being pinned down, so
everything I read tells me it's unlikely to flip.
But that I preface the question by saying, if it's real that there is a movement toward, like the early voting numbers in Texas are off the charts. Right. There are more people that have voted in early voting than voted in the last election.
Yeah, my intuition is that Texas flips, and that this election, the people who don't want to admit they're voting for Biden are the wild card, whereas last election it was the people who didn't want to admit they were voting for Trump. So to me, the hidden vote is more likely to be pro-Biden than pro-Trump this time.
Okay,
that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, so I think we've got a consensus around the polemicists here. That's exciting. Okay, we're done.
All right. Well, it's been a great show.
Yeah.
Tip the waitress.
What about Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania is screwier. One of the things about Texas and Florida is I believe that they've already started counting early votes, so they will be able to announce results on the night of November 3rd. Pennsylvania probably won't, because they have a rule that says they can't even open the early votes until November 3rd. And they also have a Republican legislature that's determined to make mischief.
But doesn't that mean you'll get some of the results of those votes when they open them on November 3rd, or are they gonna preempt them with the live voting?
You will get some results. Results always get reported as they dribble in, and then the decision desks at the network and the Associated Press have their own alchemy that they use to determine what the trends mean. But I think
that alchemy is going to be
there'll be a lot of unreported voting in Pennsylvania. So I don't know if the projections will be reliable, and I don't know what
those decision desks are not. They're not going to be operating the way that they operated in the past. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure how they're going to operate because I'm not there anymore. But I know how they operated in the past, and I know what they were using as signposts, and I just don't see how that can happen this time. I don't see how it. I think they learned that lesson in 2016.
Well,
can you explain what decision desk means?
If Pennsylvania doesn't go for Trump,
hang on a second.
Sorry,
I want to hear the answer.
Okay.
Well, so you've got the control room, which is talking to the anchors and the reporters in the field, bringing in all of the information coming in from the districts that are counting the votes, and telling the decision desks are getting this information, where the votes are, who's getting the votes, and they're trying to take the votes that are coming in and the polling and exit polling, which has always been a big deal, and then through their alchemy, coming up with a decision as to who they predict will win. They will make a decision based on all of those things. Once they feel that there's enough that they've, hit a certain mark that they have determined is the point of no return, they will then call the election. That's done at the decision desk.
So what's different this time that you're saying you don't know how it's going to work?
Because they were wrong.
And the big thing that's different this time is that there is more mail-in and early voting. So that
complicates it even more.
The unknowns are bigger. That's what's different.
Although to me, Pennsylvania is definitely Biden, and if it isn't, then it opens up Trump winning. But I think it's definitely
it could, but if Biden does win Texas, it may come out in the wash.
If he doesn't win Pennsylvania, he's not going to win Texas.
Yeah, or put it another way, if he wins Texas, he's going to win Pennsylvania.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm looking at 538. There's lots of pathways that don't include Texas or Pennsylvania that still result in a Biden win.
So I think one of the things that's been accomplished by the early voting surge is that it's minimized the possibility of Trump, taking everything to court and suppressing the results of the election. I don't think that that's in play anymore. If it ever was, I don't think it is now, because there's such an enormous, clear move toward I'm going to get out and vote before they stop me from voting. That I think is the ultimate emotional driver of this election right now.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So if that's true, then it comes down to a calculation of what percentage of that vote is going to be, important to which candidate winning. And I think that's a lot closer than the size and the momentum of the early voting. But I still think that it's going to tip over to the Democrats this time for the reasons that I think Dennis described about the 60-year cycle.
We'll see about that. I like the way you think, though.
All right. Anybody want to weigh in a little bit on the noise? I exclude Keith from this conversation because he's already been way too verbal about it. The noise surrounding the three social networks and the drive to you can come in and explain what it is that I'm trying to say, but
I thought that was excluded.
Anybody else think that this is real? Does anybody else care?
Yes, I think it's real.
I think it's real.
Yeah,
but I think that it's clear that the Republicans were on the attack, and the Democrats, all they wanted to do was say how ridiculous the hearings themselves were at all.
Yeah.
And to what end? What is that? How does that impact on whether this is a real issue or?
It's a long process. It's a long process. Yeah. Just starting up. The feds of the Justice Department fired a shot across the bow of exactly one, just Google. And I suspect that what happens with Google is going to set a precedent for what happens with the other guys.
Well, you've also got, Dennis, to say there's actually two issues. There's Section 230 of the Communications Act, which is what this week's hearing was about. And that's to do with responsibilities of platforms for the content that runs through them. And then secondly, there's the antitrust issue, which you just referred to. And they're running simultaneously, one by the Department of Justice and the other one by the FCC and Congress. So the hearing this week was the FCC Congress one. And the big takeaway was that Zuckerberg more or less embraced the need for change. It's funny because the Republicans are playing the role of the free speechers because they're reacting to the Hunter Biden takedowns, and they're taking on the persona of, hey, you guys, you shouldn't take things down even if you disagree with them, just leave them be. And the Democrats obviously are saying this whole thing is a political circus and we're not going to really participate because it's just an election ruse. But in the middle of that, Zuckerberg said, yes, please regulate us because we want you to tell us what to take down. So it's kind of begging for government censorship, really.
think it'll be.
Dorsey said, "Leave us alone."
I think what we're looking at is pretty much the same argument that we see whenever we get to a point where a large new industry with a big infrastructure needs to be separated from, or the infrastructure, the pipes need to be separated from the content. And if you look at what's happening against Google and what could happen against Facebook and everybody else, it's that at some point they have to decide whether to fish or cut bait, that the antitrust problems that they're having and it come from owning the pipes and competing with the other people that want to use those pipes legitimately to sell their content. I suspect this is going to be a lot of kabuki theater, and at the end, there's going to be a decision that causes each of these entities to, in one way or another, divest itself.
Michael?
And then the telcos will become the biggest industries in that space.
I want to hear Michael.
Again.
I don't know the answer. I think
no, I'm not the answer. Just what
Keith's analysis is correct. There are really two issues. One has to do with control of speech and whether these are platforms or networks or safe harbors. And the other has to do with anti-competitiveness and antitrust. They get lumped together because it's the world against big tech, but they are separate issues. The issue for, I think Facebook faces vulnerabilities on both of them because they are a powerhouse player in advertising, along with Google, and they are also a platform that entertains a lot of false, tendentious misinformation, and what to do about that is a serious issue.
Okay, so what about Twitter? I find myself thinking much more about Jack Dorsey's stance and the actions that Twitter's taken in the last few months. I mean, if you look at it, nobody except Twitter has actually done anything about this.
Jack is on the right side of the argument, although his team didn't help him. When his team took down the New York Post article, because it included hacked, either genuine or not, it doesn't really matter. It was because it was hacked, the documents were hacked. And Jack immediately asked his team to change that decision. In other words, make the New York Post be responsible for what it posts. We shouldn't determine that. That's the right side of the line, I believe. But however, when he got in front of Ted Cruz, Cruz leveraged the fact that they took down the Biden thing to say they should also be taking down the leader of Iran. They quoted a whole bunch of other stuff they want him to take down, but at the same time they said he shouldn't be taking down the Biden stuff. So they were just being opportunistic in their arguments for not allowing Trump to be interfered with. So it was a political,
yes, transactional.
It was transactional and political.
The Republican tradition of quote working the refs unquote lives and thrives in that world. They don't operate on principle at all. They're just trying to push things their way.
I think the right side here is, imagine we were running a social network that was successful and had 2 billion people on it. The idea that we could police in any way that would be effective what people publish, technology isn't good enough to do that yet. And certainly there wouldn't be enough human beings in the world to do it. So the truth is,
I have a plan for that.
There really just isn't a plan that would work. So you end up saying, do you want open networks or do you not? And if you do, you have to let people say what they want unless it's illegal. And then the law tells you to take it
Isn't
down.
the plan AI?
There is another layer, and that's the algorithm which funnels people this way or that, depending on what you know about them.
Yeah,
it's not simply a question of can you post this or not. It's a question of how many people get to see it.
Yeah,
and that's why I like what's going on with what Twitter's been doing is that they basically are creating these kind of straw men around the process and around the algorithm and around the how do we allow this to be promoted, and can we mark this without deleting it, and all these kinds of wrinkles on this sort of yes no kind of freedom of speech issue, which I think is largely irrelevant to a commercial network, which is what these guys all are. So I find in the messiness of what Twitter's doing, I find at least somebody has stood up and said, oh, this is just complete crap, this particular thing. Now, we may not be able to figure out how to stop it. We may not be able to figure out how to slow it down. We may not want to be in the middle of this, but here's what we're going to do anyway, because this is crap. And I think that that's healthy in this discussion, and leads to what we're seeing with Facebook, as Keith pointed out, which is that they're moving in the direction of actually, asking for intermediation on the part of the government.
What happens if the Senate flips?
Well, then the whole canvas gets reset, Frank, because that's
the point.
It's a highly politicized effort anyway. Now, where Steve is asking a really good question is, when the canvas gets reset, what direction does it get reset in? And the answer is, if the Democrats win, these companies should be more scared, because the Democrats really do want to change.
This is really an issue of licensing, and it's very easily fixed. It's an issue that has been working for well over a century in other fields like medicine, like barbershops and plumbing and a whole lot of other things. You don't try to administer this top down. To administer this top down is to make the same mistake that we made in the quality control era of the 1970s and 80s, when we tried to inspect our way to better quality of manufactured goods. We couldn't do it because inspection was the last thing we did, and we ended up with a lot of defective products or products that needed to be reworked. We had to invest in a methodology of making things that built quality in at every step. And by building quality in at every step, we were able to make much better products. So how do you do that with social media? You do it through licensing. Today, if you want to install an electrical appliance in your house, go for it. But you can't go do that for somebody else. In order to do it for somebody else, you have to be certified, you have to pass an exam, and you have to pull a permit. All of those things can be added to the way social media works. If you want to use social media as a private, personal thing, you should be able to do that. If you want to use social media to approach millions of people on the internet, you have to get certified. You have to show that you have competency in using the product and that you know the moral imperatives of what you're doing.
Well, the competency can be objective. The moral imperatives is a trickier issue, isn't it?
We do it all the
marketers,
time.
Excuse me, marketers. Where's the moral imperative in marketing?
In medicine in every state. No state examines thoracic surgeons, or brain surgeons or anybody else. You get a license to practice medicine, and then your specialty is what polices you and your ability. And if you kill people, it comes to notice pretty quickly, and action is taken. The same thing can be applied to social media. This isn't a question of whether or not we've got all the technology we need to spot something and take it down. What we need to do is build quality into what we're doing.
So how would this apply to Hunter Biden's laptop?
So I think that, Dennis, you're talking about let's just say expertise, proven expertise, let's say. And I think the problem with it is that social media is not, it's not a channel that requires expertise, because it's largely, depends, they're all different, but it's opinion based, firstly. Opinion is not subject to expertise in any way whatsoever. And so even if what you described happened, the individual use of social media would swamp the experts just numerically in terms of the number of posts. And you know, if I see Steve's post and I see you guys post, because Facebook knows that we're friends, and so it elevates them, you're going to influence me. And I won't be seeing someone else's post that I have no relationship to. I don't know that there's an easy solution to that. If you want to have an all-inclusive social media that everyone in the world can play on, isn't it as messy as the real world ultimately?
How does this?
I don't think so.
How does this influence whether bizarre conspiracy theories get posted and circulated? I mean, I know people who believe that that governments have installed 7 ionic heaters in the atmosphere to control the weather. They believe that the planes are seeding chemtrails into the atmosphere to control the weather. How do you deal with that?
Well, how do you deal with it in the real world?
Bizarre notions like that. The QAnon theories that there's a
stop talking to them.
Network working out of pizza shops.
Yeah, I mean, I have in-laws that believe in ghosts, but you know, ultimately, I just try and stay out of it.
Well, in the real world, the way you deal with it is you ignore it or you confront it.
Yeah.
You ignore it.
And every time you confront it, you end up in an argument, so you have to ignore it anyway. So in the end, it's ignoring it.
But when you have someone in the White House who promotes it, it becomes a little problematic to simply ignore it.
Yeah, which is why hopefully we're going to change that in a week.
But I don't think social media can be cleaner than the real world is. It's reflective of the actual human beings that exist on the planet. And
so Dennis, you said something.
Well,
I couldn't hear the answer.
The solution should not be as bad as the problem.
Okay, Frank, I want to hear what I couldn't hear Dennis say.
Sorry.
3 cycles ago.
Well, look, the social media shouldn't be any cleaner than the world at large. But as a practical matter, nobody on this screen right now is going to go and approach the Dalai Lama about anything. So holding up your ability to reach the Dalai Lama through social media, I think is a false flag. I think it's a ridiculous thing. Now, if you were to demonstrate your capability, remember, I'm advocating that if you want to be as messy as the real world and you want to broadcast your opinions, you're free to do so without any restriction on social media. I am also saying, though, that if you're an organization and I would put a maybe 500,000 person limit on the size of your universe. If you're an organization that wants to go beyond that and reach the Dalai Lama or the Pope or God knows who else, then you've got to demonstrate some competency. You've got to show that you've got a plumbing license and that you're not going to go dig up the street just for fun and games.
Okay, Frank, now you please say what you were saying.
Well, what I was saying was I was sort of joking, but I that the problem should not be as the solution should not be as bad as the problem, whatever that thing Trump says. It's funny you were talking. The thing about the Dalai Lama is kind of interesting because it seems to me that people at that sort of really high level tend to accept you as a friend, but tend to not interact with you. So ergo, someone like Trump will have 60 or 70 million followers, yet he follows like 19 people. And so that's the decision that is made on the part of in the transaction on the part of the individual. That's there. It's in their power to determine who they actually want to have a two-way with. So as far as making, looking at a simple solution to this, it's the individual who makes the decision.
No, that's right. I agree with that. But, and it's hard, by the way. I mean, if you've ever built anything for people, when I did EasyNet back in '94, the police visited me. And in those days, it was all about news groups, asking us to mine the news groups and expose bad people to them. And legally, if we did that, we would become responsible for everything on the news groups that went through our pipes. So we didn't want to be responsible, so we said no. And actually, Section 230 was done 2 years later, in '96, was all about making it possible for people like me to run a service and not be liable for the underlying content. And so I tend to fall down on the side of separating a service provider, which isn't just pipes, but it is pipes and code, from the publisher. And the publisher in this case is an individual. So Facebook isn't actually a publisher. When the three of them were asked in Congress this week, would you agree that you're liable for the stuff that you publish as companies? They all said yes, because they are liable for that. But they don't want to be liable for the stuff I publish on their platforms. And they shouldn't be.
So but back in those days,
what's propping this up is, in my opinion, what's propping this whole tension up is people being concerned that we're going to kill the golden goose of the internet by looking at what's going on now and dealing with that as something that needs to be regulated, as I think Dennis is talking about, or whatever. I understand our fear about, suddenly being overwhelmed by the people that Brent was talking about, the minority rule and the entropy that moves toward the people at the top. I understand that fear, but I'm not sure that we shouldn't be being more realistic about the power centers that have emerged as a result of the rules as they have been, and then decide what we want to do with the current situation, which is there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of danger, there's a lot of things that need, you can't just go dig up the street because you think it would be fun. Well, I think that's a legitimate tension that we need to address.
So back in the early days of the internet, I was going to say back in the early days of the.
Sorry, but go ahead, but I couldn't hear what Dennis was saying. Either Dennis, lean forward and speak louder if you want to say something.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you. I thought identifying the power centers is a very astute observation.
Frank?
What I was going to say was back in the early days of the internet, when you wanted to have group conversations, each of the news groups had somebody that arbitrated the conversation. I can't remember what that person was called, but there was someone at that point that was the person that ran that group, right? Mm-hmm. Today, if you join a group on, say, a Facebook, that group has an administrator who is constantly saying, okay, well, this group is not a political group, or this group is to talk about Fender guitars only and not to talk about cats. So if you're going to talk about cats, go to the cat group. That's the only place where that sort of thing exists anymore. And that is sort of a self-governed group, whereas the internet is not. And if you want to compete or be involved in it, that's your choice to do it. Otherwise, go join one of those private groups. And I think that is, that's our right as users of the internet.
Yeah, but that's precisely why I got fed up with news groups, is all those domains squatters who, who rise to the so-called top and then treat it as their own personal fiefdom.
Unless it is.
I'd rather have less control and more elasticity and the ability to be able to navigate to whatever level you're trying to navigate to.
That's good. And I agree with that because that is your choice.
Good. So we're in agreement.
I think if you think of the layers, the internet is pipes and routers. It has protocols, and protocols carry user interfaces and content. And then companies build on top of protocols. So Facebook builds on top of HTTP mainly. Twitter does also. And anyone, as long as they comply with the rules of the service, can join and do whatever they want. So to me, that's very different than, say, the New York Times. The New York Times, builds a newspaper, has an editor, chooses what to publish and what not to publish, and has a reputation based on what it prints. Facebook's reputation has nothing to do with what is printed because it doesn't print anything. We all do. So it's a new thing. And what Congress is trying to do is apply the rules of the New York Times to Facebook and Twitter, which it's really hard to do that unless they're the same thing. Mark Zuckerberg would have to be editor-in-chief, which he isn't. And neither is Jack Dorsey, and doesn't want to be either. They just want to run a platform that you can make groups on or post things on.
Well, I think they want to make a lot of money, and the ways that they go about making a lot of money are subject to user approval. And so I think there are already forces in play that have, I spend as little possible time as I can on Facebook simply because it's a natural resource for connecting with family and friends. But other than that, I just find it to be its overall algorithm is insulting and stupid.
I agree with you.
I stay away from it. But Twitter's the Wild West, and then there are new Wild Wests coming along like TikTok and maybe even YouTube to a certain extent that are going to have an impact. But this is looking at any of these individuals as being dominant. I think it's a mistake to think that because Facebook has billions of users and others have millions of users, overstates their leverage. It's kind of like an electoral college that we need to preserve. And I know that nobody agrees with me about this, and that's why I think I'm right.
Well, the other aspect of Facebook that we're not really talking a lot about is the way advertising appears in your feed. The advertising part of the Facebook product is available to people who have a purpose, whether it's a political or a marketing purpose. And a large part of the user's experience of Facebook is not just user-generated content, but it's marketer-generated content.
Yep. Yeah, well, that's the business model right there. That's, to me, the business model.
And the successful marketers are the ones that manage to present their content as though it's content, not advertising.
Yep.
Okay, I'll take that as your last thoughts for this show. I've already said my piece. Frank and then Dennis, and I think Keith, we've been talking about what he wanted to talk about for the last hour. So if you have anything succinct to say, great, but we got to wrap this one up. So let's start with Frank.
Biden wins, not in a landslide. Thank you.
Dennis.
Biden wins. We flipped the Senate. Happy days are here.
Keith.
Ditto.
What part of ditto?
Dennis. Ditto Dennis.
So I haven't heard you say that the Senate's going to flip.
Well, if there's a landslide, it goes without saying, doesn't it?
I know, but you backed away from the landslide about 4 hours ago.
Well, it's still a substantive win, and I think the Senate does flip.
Okay, Michael.
Everything that was mentioned so far, plus take a look at the state houses. I think they're going to be huge Democratic gains in the state houses.
Yeah, yeah.
So blue wave.
Like you said.
Blue tsunami.
Yeah, blue tsunami.
Okay, so figure out who you know. Figure out who you know who hasn't voted yet, and get them to do it. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gilmore.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Tina.
I want to thank.
Thank you, Tina.
Bravo.
I would like to thank Brent Leary for his usual succinctness. I find his ability to look like he's not listening and then say something that makes it clear that he was to be fascinating. I want to thank.
I think that's the profile. I think that's because he appears in profile.
I was thinking about doing that. I think there's some tactic there that he's got that's working for him there.
We agree with that. Thanks to Keith Tier. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dennis Pombrian. Thank you, sir.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And Michael Markman.
Thank you. And may I have one salute to Dennis's cat? Dennis seems to have the Cheshire cat. It fades in and fades out because of the Zoom background algorithm. It's quite remarkable how it comes and goes.
It dematerializes at will. I have two others as well. They just were too lazy to show up.
And Frank Radis, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a great bunch of shows as we lead up to this final countdown. I just think that we're going to be talking about it for a lot longer than a week or two after it.
Hopefully.
Next time, maybe we'll have to talk about how we're going to bribe Trump to go away.
So we're not going to be able to do that if he starts Trump TV.
Oh, no, I think Trump TV is a stone cold loser. Not going to go anywhere. Nobody cares. Okay.
Trump is the epitome of the old joke about how do you make a small fortune on Wall Street? You start with a bigger one. It'll happen. It'll happen with Trump TV too.
That's funny. That's good.
That's the same joke for how do you make a small fortune with a wine farm?
I don't get that. What does that mean?
You start with a big fortune. Wine farms lose money.
Oh,
That's also kind of applies to large boats.
Yeah.
A hole in the water into which you pour money.
Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again after the election, maybe during the election, for all we know.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Not funny.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So long.
Bye.
All right, we got enough